Hey y'all, we're gonna start this workshop. If I can have everyone's attention. Hello. So,
hey everybody.
Hello, come up to the front if you wanna be part of this workshop. My name is Luce. I'm really excited to share this material with y'all. Can you hear me okay? Are there speakers? How about I keep talking and let's see if this sounds better. Yeah? This sounds better?
Okay. Is that okay, Con?
Is this the
Sounds
right
good.
volume?
It sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so my name is Luce. I use they, them pronouns. Before I get into our content and introducing myself and the team, I'd actually like to learn a little bit about y'all. First of all, raise your hand if you're here because you're trying to get better as a candidate in technical interviews. Okay, that's great. I'm glad you're here, and I hope this hasn't been too confusing. This workshop's actually geared towards interviewers. Sometimes you'll probably learn a lot from peeling back this curtain, and there will be a practice. We'll do some practice activities. You'll have a chance to actually be a candidate. That's quite helpful for us. But sorry if this was a confusion. I won't be offended if you feel like you need to leave. Let's have another, raise your hand if you've interviewed, been on the other side of this table and you've interviewed before. Awesome, cool. What was difficult about, like, what was hard about this? What's hard about interviewing people? What kind of things have you encountered? What, you said all of it? Yeah, is there something else? Yeah. Here, I'm gonna throw this at you.
We're broadcasting this live right now, so if you use this, then we can hear it. The World Wide Web.
Talking to the. This is amazing. Asking the right questions, not getting too deep down in the weeds, like with something that's like brain teasery, and not getting like to the point where it's like, hey, write as a web application because that's what you're going to be doing. So figuring out like a middle ground that like feels reasonable and solves like a meaningful problem.
Yeah, sure. And trying to do that in just like 1 hour
Exactly.
or in a limited amount of time. Yeah. Thanks for your help, Eli, if you want to help with the ball.
The ever-present cultural fit piece of it.
Oh, what is cultural fit?
So, exactly. So, sure. So it's the interviewing for culture fit catch-all, right? Which can be perilous because you're either, I'm going to engage in extremes, right? You're either interviewing for somebody just like you and the people already in the office, right? Which is sort of, I guess, not what you want. We want diversity, right? We want a diversity of thought and people in the room. Or you're, so absent that, you're interviewing for something that's so ill-defined it feels really squishy and somewhere on the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
And it always seems weird, and it's always an uncomfortable conversation going in. Like, how do we define this, and how do we define our cultural fit?
Yeah, I mean, just figuring out content for interviews and how that matches to different jobs, like for different roles. I mean, that's hard, whether it's behavioral type things, communication, different technical skills. I'm going to move over to this side of the room. Is there anything else that you found that's really hard about interviewing, making hiring decisions?
Oh, I was just going to ask, like, with the cultural fit, isn't that more behavioral versus technical?
Yeah, I mean, but we need a lot of different skills to get to work together and to get work done. So it's definitely, this workshop, we will be focusing on the technical skills, but it was definitely a good point.
Okay. Sorry.
You just throw the box. I think somebody
I don't want to hurt anyone. So last point, is there anything?
Yeah, consistency across candidates and I guess, I don't want to say fairness exactly, but unbiased approach to it.
Yes,
it's difficult to avoid your biases.
Yep, consistency, being unbiased. These are all good points. There's so much. I remember when I first started interviewing, I always wanted like that extra 30 minutes. You know, like I was like, oh, is it like, should I, you know, just the decision making can be quite hard. It probably meant I wasn't a great interviewer because I was squandering some of that time with someone. Maybe, I don't know. It's like, how do we get feedback about how we're doing? Like, how do we know if we're doing a good job? Who's telling us that? Yes.
You feel like you have a good sense of who the candidate is by the end of the interview.
So if you feel like you feel, so you said if you feel like you know the candidate by the end of the interview, so kind of the sense of like ourselves, like how confident do we feel, how well did we connect? What other ways do we get feedback about how we're doing? Go ahead.
12 to 18 months after you hire them, they turn out to be really good.
Yep. Well, so that's a great point. I mean, it's unfortunate that takes so long, but and also what about the people who we don't hire and that are invisible? We never know if we ended up taking another 2 months trying to find someone when we had a great opportunity that we missed. But that's, yeah, trying to close that loop sometime later. What was that?
I thought like the standard, like to try an employee out was 90 days.
90 days. Yeah, I mean, but sometimes you don't know. Sometimes it takes a while for someone to get settled. It can take a long time to really know if a hiring decision, was good. So there's different ways we get feedback. Sometimes it's right after the interview. Sometimes we're pairing up with other people, or we go to this debrief and you get to learn from other people. Oh, what were you looking for? But yeah, often the feedback, it comes much later or not at all, especially for those people we don't hire. And how often are we actually getting feedback from candidates? Like, raise your hand if you've ever gotten feedback from a candidate. And I don't mean a scathing review on Glassdoor. Yeah? That's awesome. And it's a difficult position for a candidate to be in, to give that feedback when they're trying to get a job. So, but it's important that we all talk about interviewing and have this conversation and try to get feedback, because without feedback, we can't improve, right? Like as engineers, we do code reviews. That's how we have a language for talking about, what is code quality and what's maintainability and what are these competencies that we're looking for when we're hiring people. We have to have that cycle. And that's what I'm going for with this workshop. So I could, we only have an hour, but I could come up and say, well, this is exactly the rubric you should use and how you should do your interviewing. And it would be a very tiny fish that I would be giving you in this small amount of time. What we're really going to focus on here, we'll do a little bit of that. You will have some concrete takeaways from this workshop. But what we're really trying to do is teach you to fish and to have this cycle of being able to assess interviewer performance and your interview process so that you can figure out what works for you and your company. Does that sound good? Yes, great. So just to back up, before we jump into some of our activities, I just want to back up and properly introduce myself and let you know what we do at Carrot, just for a little bit of context. I'm not just some random person talking about interviewing. I work for Carrot. It's a company that specializes in technical interviews. So we have companies like Pinterest as a client of ours. They've recruited a ton of candidates, more candidates than their engineers have time to interview, because their engineers are trying to do their jobs. And so at Carrot, we have a ton of interviewers that we've trained to give consistent, predictable, unbiased interviews. So we interview Pinterest's candidates. Pinterest then conducts on-sites and continues with the rest of the process. And then because we've integrated with their ATS systems and we're working with them on their full pipeline, we're able to close this feedback loop. And we don't have to wait a year or 18 months, because we've been doing this with tens of thousands of interviews and tons of clients. So we kind of have a data trove that we are able to kind of close that loop a little bit faster for some of our clients. So that's super cool. I mean, that's just the power of when you have a company who can devote all of their time and resources and science and engineering to a problem. That's what we can do. And so we've kind of broken out, we sort of call this the anatomy of an interview process. It has the things we've already talked about, defining what your competencies are, figuring out what your questions are that you're going to ask, and ultimately making a hiring decision and using some data to process and improve and figure out where are your bottlenecks and how can you do this better than your competitors. What we are going to focus on in this interview is actually conducting the interview. Sorry, what we're going to do in this workshop is conducting the interview and assessing performance. So just the real core, the core pieces for interviewing. That's what we're going to focus on. Eli, this thing has stopped working, but I think it's okay. If you can, though, thanks. So why focus on this? Just real quick, I just want to say that it is, I think it's one of the best ways that we can have an impact, because not only is interviewing the core of a hiring process, but it's something that all of us can take take away from this workshop and apply immediately. We don't always control the full hiring, decision-making process, or maybe even, the question creation. Although as engineers and companies, we often wear a lot of hats and maybe can, really get involved in those ways. But it's a huge impact. And you know what? It's impacting the candidate experience directly. And that's huge. Because when we have candidates going through interview processes, they're looking at our companies and deciding whether they want to work with us and whether they want to tell their friends, if, hey, I didn't get this job, but wow, that was such a cool process. Like, check this out. We love getting that feedback. And it's important to maybe avoid those scathing Glassdoor reviews because no one wants that. So, yeah, so I'm talking about this because this is how I fit into Carrot. So I lead the interviewing community with a team of people here who I'll introduce real quick when we get into our demo. And it's a great community of interviewers and who are really focused on how do we interview interviewers? Like, how do we hire interviewers? How do we lift engineers, senior engineers to be senior interviewers? So we're going to apply some of the processes that we've learned to this workshop, and the core of that being practice and feedback. So. And I'm going to skip through this. Let me just check time. Yeah, I'm going to skip through this, but we have some data that just kind of tells you what you would expect. That the more often you interview, the better you get. If you're just interviewing once a month, you get a little rusty. You kind of forget what's happening. If you're as you've done more interviews, you can get better. Like we see with our interviewers that maybe after 50 interviews, their error rate, so their accuracy, the candidate experience can get it starts to become like really low compared to the interviews they're doing, because it's a lot to learn. Yes.
How do you define what is accurate when there is no defined question and different answer?
What's accurate? Well, what we're going for is like a predictive, an interview process that can be predictive. And so, as for example, if we're going to get to this. It's a good question. Let us dig in. So why don't we move towards that? So and the main goal is, if it takes 10,000 hours to master something, we don't have 10,000 hours. So that's what we're going to try to build up some tools here so we can have an iterative process, but also so that this process doesn't take forever, that we can sort of immediately start feeling we're doing something in the right direction. So to do this, we're going to start first of all with a demo. Interview horror story. We have here Eli. He's one of our interviewers, very active in our performance processes, and he's going to be playing the skeptic. We actually had to spend all weekend practicing with him to like untrain all of his nice mannerisms and get him to be a real jerk. And then we have here the unsuspecting victim, Christian, who also on the team, and he will be playing the role of a candidate, just trying to get through and survive, and all of the things that we've all experienced, being like nervous and just trying to understand what the question is. They're going to demo. They're going to do a live demo for us, about 7 minutes long. Take notes on what you see. Like, assess the interviewer. Right? This is not about the candidate. In this case, we're not trying to hire Christian. We're trying to see.
Maybe just try to know what the candidate is experiencing from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, what is the candidate experiencing? That's important. But so take notes about how what the interviewer is doing, and then we'll discuss as a group. And there is, and I'm going to go through the question just real quick so you all have a sense of what this is. We're going to use the same question in the second half of this workshop. We'll pair up, and you all will basically do the same thing, interview each other, to sort of practice it and figure out some other scenarios. And before we get started, let's just figure out what this question is, just so we all have a sense of what's going on. So the point is that we have this elevator. It starts on floor 0. There's an input string, in this case, say 3U1D. What that means is that the elevator, it's like a log of where the elevator has moved. So the elevator went 3 floors up, U for up. It went 1 floor down, D for down. And now we want to know, well, what floor is it on? And so it's on floor 2. So the interview question is going to be like, write a function that takes this input and figure out what floor is the elevator on right now. Does that make sense? Any questions about this?
So with I see below the sample input output, Are we assuming that for each flow that it's... Nice catch, or throw. So are we assuming that for the sample input output, the 3 at the bottom, that all 3 start at 0 or?
Yep, great question. The elevator always starts at floor 0.
Okay, I just didn't know if like the second one was starting at floor 8 and then it went 1 up, then 2 up, and then blah, blah, blah. Okay, my bad.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And you'll see, so in front of you, though, there's some pamphlets. If you're at these tables, you have some pamphlets on the back table over there if you didn't get a chance, if you're standing in the back. There is a page called the interviewer rubric, which you don't have to use it. You're welcome to use it as you're taking notes. Maybe it gives you some ideas. If it's too confusing or too much, like, feel free to ignore. We'll come back to it later. I just want to I want everyone, this is our first time doing this live demo. I'd like everyone to put their hands together and welcome Christian, the unsuspecting victim and the skeptic, to the stage. Okay, action.
All right. We're going to start you out with an easy one. Given an expression string that contains a series of elevator movements, determine the final position of the elevator. Each movement in the input string will consist of the number of floors traversed and a direction of travel, such as 3U for up 3 floors or 1D for down 1 floor. You can assume that the input is always valid and the initial movement begins from floor 0.
Okay. So basically, you want to know where the elevator has gone. Is that right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I got it.
What exactly does the input look like?
It's like 3U for up 3. The input string will consist of the number of floors traversed and a direction of travel, such as 3U for up 3 floors and 1D for down 1 floor.
Okay, I'm just going to write that. So 3U for D, is that a valid input?
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, write some code.
Okay, all right. Okay, I guess the first thing I want to do is just make a character array. So I'll just split on the empty string and create it that way.
Is that split really necessary?
I think so. I think I need to do this for the way I would like to solve it.
What would the space complexity of that be?
I don't know what space complexity is actually.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. You can do it like that.
Okay. Is it all right if I use split? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. First thing, I think I'll just go through the array so long as there's still something in it. I'm gonna just take the first element from the front and look at that. So to take the first element off, I guess, I can't remember, is it pop or split that I use? Could you help me with that?
So you know this is a JavaScript role, right? You need to know JavaScript. You're gonna need to use it on the job. It's very basic JavaScript.
Yeah, I just can't remember this one method. I guess I'll just use pop and I'll come back and fix that if that's a problem. Like, can I do that? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So if temp is not U and temp is not D, then I'll just add temp to the, oh, I need to add a total here. So sorry about that. So yeah, so if temp is not U or D, then I'll just add temp to total, and then I'll just print that out. Oops.